Prague, 1942. A city silenced by fear. The cobblestone streets echo not with footsteps of freedom, but with the click of German boots. Above the rooftops, Nazi banners ripple in the wind. Beneath them, an entire nation holds its breath. Every window shuttered. Every whisper dangerous. Every knock at the door could mean disappearance. At the center of it all sits one man, Reinhard Heydrich. Blond, sharp-featured, and cold-eyed, he moves through his offices like a machine built for cruelty. He is not a soldier in the traditional sense. He is an engineer of death, one of Hitler's most intelligent, ambitious, and ruthless men. To his subordinates, he is perfection. To the people of Czechoslovakia, he is terror itself. Appointed as the Reichsprotector of Bohemia and Moravia, Heydrich arrives in Prague in September 1941 with a single mission: crush the Czech spirit. Within weeks, he does exactly that. Resistance leaders are arrested and executed. Thousands vanish into concentration camps. The city that once sang with culture and defiance becomes a cage of silence. The Gestapo works around the clock, and hanging from the gallows in the city square are reminders of what defiance costs. But Heydrich is not content with local terror. In Berlin, he is one of the architects of something far darker: the final solution, the systematic extermination of Europe's Jews. At the Wannsee Conference in early 1942, he sits at the head of the table, calmly organizing genocide as if it were a business plan. To his superiors, he is efficient, loyal, indispensable. To the Allies, he is one of the most dangerous men alive. Hitler calls him the man with the iron heart. Himmler sees him as his eventual successor. But every tyrant eventually creates the very hatred that destroys him. The brutality that keeps Heydrich's rule intact also forges the will of those who refuse to live under it. In exile, the Czechoslovak government in London watches helplessly as their homeland bleeds. To the world, Czechoslovakia seems broken. But among its exiled soldiers, rage burns hotter than fear. They want to strike back, not symbolically, but decisively. They want to kill the man who personifies Nazi domination. And so, deep within the planning rooms of the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, a single name is written on a secret document: Operation Anthropoid. The mission's goal is simple in writing, impossible in execution: assassinate Reinhard Heydrich, the Butcher of Prague. It is a plan so audacious that even Allied officers question its feasibility. To kill a man so heavily guarded, in a city drowning in informants, seems suicidal. But two men volunteer without hesitation: Jozef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, both Czech patriots trained in Britain. They understand the risk. They accept it anyway. Because to them, Czechoslovakia isn't just occupied, it's being erased. And if one man's death can show the world that their country still resists, then it's worth everything. As the first snow falls over occupied Prague, the butcher feels untouchable. He rides through the city streets in an open-top Mercedes, unafraid, believing no one would dare touch him. He doesn't know it yet, but death is already watching. In a small, rain-soaked corner of wartime Britain, two men prepared for one of the most dangerous missions of World War II. Jozef Gabčík, a Slovak sergeant, and Jan Kubiš, a Czech corporal, were soldiers of a nation that no longer existed. Their homeland carved up by the Nazis, its flag erased from Europe. They had escaped across borders, through enemy patrols, and finally reached England to fight for a country that was still free. By late 1941, both men were handpicked by the Czechoslovak government in exile, working alongside the British Special Operations Executive SOE To lead an operation so bold, it bordered on suicide. The assassination of Reinhard Heydrich. Their training took place in the quiet countryside of Scotland, far from the front lines, but no less intense. Days were spent mastering sabotage, demolitions, handguns, and the deadly efficiency of the Sten submachine gun. A weapon designed for resistance fighters, compact and easy to conceal. They learned to jump from aircraft, navigate by night, and survive behind enemy lines. Every movement was drilled to perfection, because one mistake, one hesitation, would mean death. But training could never prepare them for what awaited in Prague. They were not commandos with extraction plans or armored support. Once they landed, there would be no way out. This was not a mission of survival. It was a mission of symbolism. A strike meant to remind the world that Czechoslovakia still fought back. By December 1941, Gabčík and Kubiš were ready. Alongside a few other paratroopers assigned to separate missions, they boarded a Royal Air Force Halifax bomber. The night was cold, the plane heavy with equipment and silence. They knew that by morning they would be behind enemy lines, cut off, hunted, and alone. On December 28, 1941, they parachuted into the dark countryside near Prague. It wasn't where they were supposed to land. The drop zone had been miscalculated, and instead of friendly contacts, they landed in the middle of confusion and danger. Their supplies were scattered, and one man was injured. But Gabčík and Kubiš recovered quickly, buried their parachutes, gathered what they could, and began their slow journey toward Prague on foot. By January 1942, they reached the capital, slipping into the city like ghosts. The Gestapo ruled every street. Patrols, checkpoints, and informants were everywhere. But the Czech resistance, small, terrified but still alive, made contact. They provided safe houses, forged papers, and information. It was through them that the assassins began to study their target. Heydrich's daily routine was predictable. Each morning, he traveled from his country residence in Panenské Břežany to his office at Prague Castle. He rode in an open-top Mercedes-Benz 320 convertible, unescorted, confident that his fearsome reputation made him untouchable. Gabčík and Kubiš saw their opportunity. They scouted possible ambush points along his route, narrow streets, sharp turns, and intersections where his car would have to slow down. After weeks of surveillance, they chose one spot, a tight bend near Bulovka Hospital in the suburb of Liban. From January to May 1942, they waited, planned, and adjusted. Resistance contacts brought in explosives, modified grenades, and small arms. They rehearsed escape routes through Prague's maze of alleys. The tension was constant. The Gestapo was everywhere. Any slip, a wrong word, a suspicious look, could destroy everything. During this time, the two men changed. They no longer spoke about returning home. They didn't plan for after. Their faces grew thinner, their eyes harder. They lived in the shadows of safe houses, under false names, hunted by an enemy that had no mercy. Then came the message. Heydrich would travel alone on May 27th. It was time. They cleaned their weapons, packed their grenades, and prepared to face the most powerful Nazi in Czechoslovakia. In broad daylight, with nowhere to run. There was no more hesitation, no turning back. For Gabčík and Kubiš, this was not just an assassination. It was justice. Morning, May 27, 1942. Prague was quiet, the sun climbing above a city that had forgotten what freedom looked like. For the two men hiding near a tram stop in the suburb of Liban, this was the moment they had spent 6 months preparing for. Jozef Gabčík stood at the corner of the narrow curve in the road, his coat heavy with the concealed Sten submachine gun. Jan Kubiš waited on the opposite side, his briefcase holding a modified anti-tank grenade. Between them lay a section of street where a black Mercedes-Benz 320 convertible would soon slow down, and with it, the most feared man in occupied Europe. Reinhard Heydrich's schedule never changed. Every morning, he rode from his villa in Panenské Břežany to Prague Castle, confident that no one dared to touch him. No escort, no armored vehicle, just his driver, SS Oberscharführer Johann Klein, and an arrogance that made him believe he was untouchable. At 10:30 a.m., the car approached the sharp curve near Bulovka Hospital, forced to reduce speed. Gabčík stepped forward, raised his Sten gun, aimed directly at the open car, and pulled the trigger. Nothing. The weapon jammed. For one frozen second, everything stopped. Then Heydrich realized what was happening. Instead of ordering his driver to accelerate, he made a fatal mistake. He stood up in the car, pulling out his pistol, intent on firing back. From across the street, Kubiš reacted instantly. He ripped the grenade from his briefcase, pulled the pin, and hurled it toward the car. It struck the rear fender and exploded. The blast tore through the vehicle, ripping metal and flesh. Shrapnel shredded the back seat, embedding into Heydrich's body, his lungs, spleen, and diaphragm punctured by fragments and horsehair from the car's upholstery. Smoke and screams filled the air. The explosion threw Kubiš backward, his face and arm torn by fragments. Heydrich staggered from the wreckage, clutching his side, his uniform soaked with blood. Gabčík, now exposed, drew his pistol and fired, forcing the dazed driver to duck for cover. Both assassins fled. Kubiš mounted a bicycle, blood streaming down his face. Gabčík sprinted through alleyways, chased briefly by bystanders and confused soldiers. Within minutes, they vanished into the maze of Prague's streets. Meanwhile, Heydrich collapsed on the roadside. Civilians rushed to help, unaware who he was. Within minutes, an ambulance carried him to Bulovka Hospital, the same facility near the ambush site. Surgeons operated for hours, removing shrapnel, cleaning wounds, and stabilizing him. For a brief moment, it seemed he might live, but infection set in. Septicemia, caused by debris and horsehair from the car's upholstery driven deep into his body. Despite antibiotics, his condition worsened rapidly. On June 4, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich died, the highest-ranking Nazi official to be assassinated during the war. News of his death spread through Berlin like a shockwave. Hitler was enraged. Himmler was stunned. Heydrich's funeral in Prague was followed by a grand ceremony in Berlin, attended by the entire Nazi elite. To the Reich, he became a martyr. To the Czechoslovak resistance, he became proof that even the most powerful tyrant could bleed. But the victory was short-lived. The Nazis demanded vengeance, and their answer would come swiftly, with a brutality that would scar the nation forever. The death of Reinhard Heydrich ignited one of the most brutal reprisals in all of World War II. Hitler's fury was immediate and uncontrollable. He demanded 1,000 Czech lives for every drop of Heydrich's blood. What followed was not justice, it was terror. Within hours of Heydrich's death on June 4, 1942, the Gestapo and SS flooded Prague. Entire neighborhoods were sealed off. Thousands were questioned, beaten, and dragged away. Anyone suspected of sheltering resistance members was executed on the spot. The Nazi command offered massive rewards for information, money, rations, and promises of safety. Fear spread faster than the news itself. But the Czech resistance despite the chaos, stayed silent. Gabčík and Kubiš remained hidden in safe houses, moving constantly, changing identities, and trusting only a handful of loyal patriots. Still, the noose was tightening. In a moment of desperation and betrayal, one man, Karel Čurda, another Czech paratrooper involved in a different mission, broke under pressure. He went to the Gestapo and revealed everything: names, addresses, and safe houses. His betrayal doomed the network. On June 18, 1942, German forces finally located the assassins. The last refuge was the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius in Prague. Inside the crypt, Gabčík, Kubiš, and their comrades prepared for their final stand. Surrounded by 700 German troops, they refused to surrender. The assault began before dawn. SS troops stormed the upper level, exchanging gunfire with the defenders. The first clash killed Kubiš, mortally wounded by grenades and bullets. The remaining men retreated into the crypt below the church, where Gabčík and two others held their ground for hours. German forces flooded the crypt with water and tear gas, but the resistance fighters refused to give up. When their ammunition ran out, they made their final decision. One by one, they took their own lives, rather than fall into Nazi hands. Every man in that crypt died. None were captured alive. The Nazis wanted to erase them, to make their deaths meaningless, but they went even further. As an act of collective punishment, Hitler ordered the village of Lidice, accused falsely of aiding the assassins, to be completely destroyed. On June 10, 1942, German troops surrounded Lidice. Every man over the age of 15 was lined up and shot. 173 in total. The women were sent to concentration camps. The children were separated, some murdered, others taken to Germany for re-education. The entire village was burned, its ruins flattened, its name erased from maps. A similar fate met Ležáky, another village accused of resistance ties. Its people were executed, its buildings destroyed. The Nazis filmed the destruction as a warning to others. This is what happens when you defy the Reich. But the opposite happened. The world took notice. Britain, the United States, and even the Soviet Union condemned the massacres. The name Lidice became a symbol of Nazi cruelty and Czech courage. Across continents, towns and newborn children were named Lidice, in memory of what was lost. The Gestapo claimed victory, but the truth was undeniable. The assassination of Heydrich shattered the illusion of Nazi invincibility. The men who had died in that Prague church had achieved the impossible. They had struck fear into the heart of the Third Reich. The mission was over, but its echo reshaped the war. Operation Anthropoid was not just the assassination of a Nazi official, it was the rebirth of a nation's pride. For years, Czechoslovakia had lived under the shadow of surrender and occupation. But with Heydrich's death, that image shattered. Two soldiers, armed with little more than courage and conviction, had done what no army had managed. They struck at the very core of Nazi power. In the aftermath, the Czechoslovak government in exile gained new respect among the Allies. The assassination proved that the Czech people were not collaborators, but active fighters. In response, Britain and France officially annulled the 1938 Munich Agreement, acknowledging that the pre-war betrayal of Czechoslovakia was unjust. That single act, born from blood and sacrifice, restored the legitimacy of a nation erased from the map. Across occupied Europe, resistance movements took heart. Underground fighters in France, Poland, Norway, and the Balkans learned of the daring daylight attack in Prague. It became proof that the Nazi machine could be wounded, its leaders vulnerable. The myth of Nazi invincibility of untouchable authority had been broken. But for Czechoslovakia, the price was immense. Thousands were executed, entire villages erased, and families destroyed. Yet even through the terror, the names Gabčík and Kubiš became symbols of defiance whispered in secret. After the war, the crypt of the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius became sacred ground, a memorial to courage and self-sacrifice. Today, it stands not only as a place of remembrance, but as a warning of what ordinary men dared to do when faced with tyranny. Reinhard Heydrich's name has faded into infamy, a symbol of cruelty and oppression. But the memory of those who ended him lives on with honor. Operation Anthropoid remains one of the most significant resistance missions in modern history. A story of two men who knew they would not survive, yet acted anyway. Their message is eternal. Even in the darkest times, courage can strike harder than fear. If this story of unthinkable bravery moved you, then honor their legacy. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to WWII Heroes Legends, where the forgotten heroes of history are brought back to life. Because as long as we remember their stories, their courage will never die.